10 minutes, 6 brutal interruptions. Melania Trump believed she'd silenced Jasmine Crockett for good until Jasmine struck back and turned the tables on live television. The audience gasped, the cameras froze, and Melania's confidence collapsed. What move destroyed her so fast? Stay with us, this is a story worth every second of your time. The hearing room blazed white like a battlefield under interrogation lights. The red microphone light blinked. There was no way out now. The tension was electric, every breath loud, every shuffle magnified. It felt less like Congress and more like a public execution. Jasmine Crockett sat steady, her folder, thick as a shield, knuckles tight, but eyes unflinching. She looked like someone ready to fight with facts sharper than knives. Then the doors opened. Melania Trump entered in a dazzling white dress heels, striking clack-clack across the marble floor. Her smile was cold confident, a warning that she'd been on this stage before. The gavel hit. This hearing begins now. Jasmine lowered her eyes to her file. Melania tilted her chin, smirk curling like a queen, certain she's about to watch someone fall. The gavel echoed once, sharp and final. Jasmine Crockett lifted her folder, ready to begin. Under precedent established in she started, but Melania lunged in before the second sentence landed. "That doesn't apply to me," she snapped, her voice slicing through the air. The chair didn't stop her. Instead, he nodded lightly, letting her continue. Jasmine froze, microphone light fading to red. The first interruption hit like a jab, clean, fast, and humiliating. Jasmine tried again, steady but tense. "Public influence carries a duty of—" "I'm not a politician," Melania interjected, leaning toward the mic. "Don't lump me in with them," the crowd murmured, instantly reporters whispering as cameras zoomed in. Jasmine opened her mouth to reclaim the point, but found no space between the noise and Melania's calm defiance. The second cut landed deeper, cleaner. A flicker of irritation flashed in Jasmine's eyes. She turned a page, raising a document. "According to the record, the context you present is edited. It's unfair." Melania's tone dripped with disdain, her words perfectly timed. The microphone crackled from feedback, drowning Jasmine's voice completely. For the third time, the younger congresswoman was muted not by the system, but by skillful disruption. Jasmine pressed forward, voice lower, but more focused. "If we look at the data from..." Melania leaned back, smiling. "I have the right to change my opinion. Are you trying to prosecute that right too?" A few people in the back chuckled under their breath. The laughter spread quickly, bouncing off marble walls. The camera light hit Jasmine's face tight, composed but burning beneath the surface. Fourth interruption. Jasmine clenched her pen, refusing to flinch. "The consequences of misinformation, and what metric measures morality?" Melania cut in again, her smirk sharp enough to draw blood. The room erupted with laughter, this time louder, crueler. It wasn't a hearing anymore. It was a spectacle. Jasmine's cheeks reddened for half a second, but she didn't fire back. She sat perfectly still, absorbing every sting in silence. The fifth blow landed like a public slap. Then came the final strike. Jasmine tried to close her opening statement. "In summary, bang." Melania's palm hit the table. "Do not turn me into a political figure. I object." The sudden outburst made the microphones buzz, and the chamber itself seemed to tremble. Reporters jerked their heads up, lenses snapping toward Jasmine. Her lips pressed together, her hands motionless on the folder. She didn't say a word. The sixth interruption had sealed the round. For 10 full minutes, Jasmine hadn't finished a single paragraph. Every attempt to speak was sliced apart, every argument dismantled mid-sentence. The chair stayed silent, his gaze fixed but unmoved. A few Republican lawmakers traded smirks, the soundless kind that said they'd already picked a winner. Melania leaned back in her chair, her smile thin but triumphant. Her fingers drummed once on the table like a boxer tapping her gloves after landing clean hits. Jasmine looked down at her file, quiet, unblinking. From the outside, it looked like defeat. But behind those still eyes, something was changing. The first round was over, or so everyone thought. The room was still humming from Melania's last outburst. Jasmine sat perfectly upright, shoulders squared, eyes locked on the empty space ahead. The pen in her hand trembled ever so slightly, caught between control and fury. Her face showed nothing, but her silence screamed louder than words. Cameras zoomed in, catching the smallest twitch in her fingers. It looked like surrender, and that's exactly what everyone thought. A whisper rippled through the room. "She's done!" Another voice, Crockett, just froze. A Republican lawmaker tapped his pen, waiting for the chair to move things along. Even the reporters started to lower their cameras. Melania leaned back, her grin widening, mistaking Jasmine's stillness for defeat. The red recording light glowed steady on both women, but only one seemed to know she was still fighting. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't fidget. Her silence was deliberate, carved from steel. The longer she stayed quiet, the bolder Melania became, gesturing, straightening her dress, soaking in the illusion of control. The white lights above burned harsher now, revealing every line of tension around Jasmine's eyes. The camera lingered on her face, broadcasting that losing expression to millions watching at home. But in that quiet, something changed. Her gaze sharpened, focused, alive. Beneath the calm mask, a spark flickered, not rage but precision. She wasn't breaking, she was waiting, and the ones watching closely could feel it, that strange electric pause before the storm. Because if 6 interruptions had gone Melania's way, what would happen when the 7th came? The silence stretched like a taut wire. Then Jasmine's hand moved, slow, deliberate, pulling a white envelope from her folder. Every camera light flicked back on. She slid a single document across the table and unfolded it with surgical precision. Inside was the full transcript of Melania Trump's past statement, the one where she'd claimed certain voting methods opened doors for fraud, a line that had gone viral and fueled waves of misinformation online. Alongside it were screenshots, headlines, and reposts, thousands of distorted echoes, spreading that same claim across the country. Melania shifted, but her confidence didn't waver. Not yet. She leaned forward, voice sharp and fast. "I cannot be responsible for every way people interpret my words." The 7th interruption hit clean and practiced until Jasmine moved. Her head rose, eyes blazing into the light. The microphone caught her voice like a blade against steel. "You've interrupted me 6 times in 10 minutes, Jasmine said, each word measured, each syllable landing like a strike. "And this time I will not let you." The room jolted. The sound system gave a low, piercing hum, amplifying her tone into something larger than speech. It felt like a verdict. The cameras zoomed in, catching Melania's smirk falter for the first time. A flicker of doubt crossed her face, brief but real. Jasmine didn't blink. "You said, and I quote, that mail-in ballots and drop boxes were an invitation for corruption. That statement was shared over 20 million times, sparking protests, confusion, even threats against poll workers." She paused only long enough for the words to hit. "Now tell this committee, do you have any evidence that you ever corrected that claim?" The impact was instant. The chamber froze. Reporters' fingers lifted from their keyboards mid-type. The only sounds were the faint hum of lights and a few nervous coughs breaking the heavy air. Lawmakers exchanged uneasy glances, some leaning back, others watching Melania closely, waiting to see if she would fight or fold. Jasmine pressed on, her tone unshakable. "You built influence with those words," she continued, voice low but lethal. "You let them spread unchecked while real people paid the price. So I'll ask again, did you ever set the record straight?" The balance of power shifted visibly. The same microphone Melania had hijacked 6 times before now turned against her, carrying Jasmine's every word like a command. Melania's lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time, she was the one silenced. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Even the chair, who had sat motionless all morning, leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowed. Jasmine kept her stare locked, not blinking, not smiling. Her pen tapped once against the folder, a single crisp beat. Then she delivered the final blow, slow and cold. One answer, just one, can change everything. The air in the hearing room turned heavy, almost physical. Melania's image filled every screen, her silence echoing louder than her words ever had. The battle lines were drawn, but now the question wasn't who would speak next. It was whether Melania could speak at all. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Melania sat, frozen lashes fluttering fast, her hands clasped so tight the knuckles turned white. She didn't speak. The silence stretched thick and heavy until it became a sound of its own, a low hum of tension that filled every corner of the room. Someone in the audience shifted a chair, creaked sharply, and a reporter coughed to break the pressure, but it only made the moment heavier. Every camera stayed fixed on Melania, waiting for a single word. None came. Jasmine didn't move. Her gaze stayed locked steady as stone. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the still air like a clean blade. "I don't need an apology," she said calmly, eyes never leaving Melania's face. "I need clarity." The words landed flat and final, leaving no space for performance. She leaned closer, lowering her tone just enough for the microphones to catch every syllable. Then Jasmine began to speak again, slower this time, her words carrying the weight of ordinary lives. "A teacher casting her first ballot told me she hesitated for minutes because she was scared she'd do it wrong," Jasmine said, her voice steady but fierce. "A single mother told me she almost didn't vote at all. She thought the process was rigged, that her voice wouldn't count." She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly as the camera zoomed in. And a young man, freshly naturalized, said he turned in his ballot shaking because he believed one wrong move could make him lose his citizenship. Each story landed with the force of truth, quiet but undeniable. The words didn't echo, they sank. The room seemed smaller now, the air tighter, as if everyone had been pulled closer to Jasmine's voice. Even Melania's breath grew shallow, her expression flickering between guilt and resistance. Jasmine didn't stop. Her hand rested flat on the folder, steady, unshaking. "These are the people who listened to your words," she said firmly, "and they're the ones who paid for them." No one dared move. The only sound left was the buzz of the overhead lights and the distant clicks of cameras recording history in real time. Jasmine exhaled slowly, her tone softening, but her message cutting deeper. So she said, the silence wrapping around her final words like a drumbeat when the evidence is finally on the table. "Where does silence have left to hide?" The question didn't need an answer. It already filled the room. The silence after Jasmine's question had become unbearable. She broke it not with more words but with evidence. She reached for her folder and lifted the first stack of papers, her expression calm but precise. "These," she said, "are the numbers showing what happened after your words." She placed the first file down with a hard thud. "Within 24 hours of your statement about fraud risk in mail-in ballots, misinformation posts increased by 312% across major social platforms. Hashtags linked to your quote reached 47 million impressions in 3 days. County election offices received 18,000 calls in a single weekend from confused or frightened voters asking if their votes would even count." She paused, then added softly, "This is what your voice did when it left the room." Another thud as she pushed the file toward the committee. The second file followed. "These are sworn affidavits from people affected by those words." She dropped it, thud. "A Texas school teacher, age 32, testified she nearly spoiled her first ballot because she believed she had to sign twice to prove it was real." She turned a page. "A single mother in Ohio, name withheld for safety, admitted she skipped early voting after seeing your clip circulate with captions warning, 'Drop boxes are fake.'" Her voice tightened. "And a young man in Pennsylvania, newly naturalized, wrote that he waited outside the polling station for 2 hours, too afraid to enter, until his supervisor confirmed it was legal for him to vote by mail." Each story was brief, ordinary, and devastating. Jasmine didn't slow down. She pulled the final chart from her folder, a clean timeline printed in red and black. Thud. "This," she said, "is before and after." A single red line cut through the middle the day Melania's quote aired. Before, confusion complaints averaged 62 per day. After, they jumped to 841, and every spike follows the moments your words were replayed on television. The timeline didn't need dramatics. The math was enough. The committee leaned forward, every eye on the growing pile of evidence. Each thud was a hammer blow in a courtroom built from truth. Reporters typed in silence now, too focused to breathe. Melania's posture stiffened, the sparkle of her confidence fading under fluorescent light. Jasmine looked up, her voice steady, her tone almost gentle. "Numbers, testimonies, time. They don't lie." She rested her hand on the stack, fingers splayed, claiming the moment. "You said nothing while people lost faith in their own democracy." She drew in one quiet breath, then delivered her closing line, every word clear as glass. "Silence when your words are being misused is not neutrality. It is complicity." The room didn't move. The weight of that final sentence hung in the air like a verdict. The evidence still echoed through the room like a drumbeat. Jasmine didn't blink. She turned her head slowly toward Melania, the lights glinting off the silver edge of the nameplate in front of her. Her voice came low-measured but impossible to ignore. "Right here, right now," she said, her tone like a verdict being read. "Are you willing to state clearly? Do you support every lawful form of voting?" The air thickened, drawn tight as wire. Every camera in the room whirred, zooming closer, the red record lights burning hotter. Melania didn't answer. Her eyes darted left, then right, scanning the panel as if someone might save her. The white lights above seemed to grow brighter, bleaching every shadow from her face. Her hand twitched on the table. For the first time all day, she looked unsure. A camera zoomed in so close that the tremor of her breath was visible on live television. Jasmine didn't move, didn't blink, just waited. The silence felt like forever, compressed into seconds. Then finally Melania spoke. Her voice cracked on the first word but steadied midway. "I support every lawful method of voting," she said. The words were clear, undeniable, inescapable. For a heartbeat, no one reacted. The entire chamber caught between disbelief and relief. And then the room exploded. Applause broke out, thunderous and uncontrollable, echoing off the marble walls. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, microphones thrust toward the witness table. Jasmine didn't stand. She only closed her folder, the corners aligning perfectly. A small, quiet smile curved her lips, not triumph, but something steadier, deeper. Melania, still seated, forced a grin of her own, though her eyes betrayed the fracture beneath it. The tension that had armored her all morning was gone, replaced by a thin veneer of poise that cracked under the relentless camera lights. The chair's gavel pounded once for order, but the noise barely dimmed. The hearing room was chaos, half disbelief, half vindication. The quote that Melania had avoided for years had finally been said, not in a press release, not through a spokesperson, but under oath on record before the nation. Jasmine rose at last, straightening her blazer, her posture calm amid the storm of flashes. She glanced once toward the crowd, then at Melania, whose smile faltered as their eyes met. They left the table together, but not as equals. Jasmine's stride was steady, purposeful, cameras following her every step. Melania kept her chin high, but her gaze drifted unfocused, as if she already knew this was the moment that would define her legacy. One woman exited as a victor of truth, the other as a symbol of silence finally broken. And as the doors closed behind them, the echo of Jasmine's question still lingered in the air, proof that one line asked at the right time can change history. The doors of the hearing room had barely closed when the headlines hit every screen across America. Melania Trump publicly supports all lawful methods of voting for the first time. It was the sentence that no one expected to hear, and it spread through the country like electricity. News anchors repeated it with disbelief, their voices tense with the thrill of breaking history in real time. Commentators leaned forward at their desks, rewinding footage, freezing frames, replaying the exact second Melania's lips parted and those words slipped out. In that instant, the balance of power had shifted, and everyone watching knew it. The networks turned it into their lead story. CNN ran a split-screen replay of Jasmine's piercing stare beside Melania's strained smile. Fox News called it a rare reversal of control. BBC labeled it a defining moment in political accountability. Within an hour, it had circled the globe. One clip, just 10 seconds long, captured everything: Melania's silence, the tension building, and the final crack when she finally said it. By evening, it had racked up tens of millions of views. Viewers slowed it down, watching every twitch, every flicker of emotion, every flickering blink that betrayed hesitation. Social media erupted. The video spread like wildfire, shared in group chats, reposted across continents, dissected on live streams. People didn't just watch it, they studied it. They quoted Jasmine's line, "I don't need an apology. I need clarity." Like scripture. They rewound to the second Jasmine leaned forward and asked the question that no one had dared to. Comment sections turned into public debates. She didn't shout. She didn't rage, one user wrote. She waited, and then she ended the argument with one sentence. Talk shows devoted full hours to the moment. On morning programs, panels of journalists, activists, and teachers argued over what it meant. Was this a political shift, a media lesson, or a moral reckoning? A veteran commentator summed it up perfectly. It wasn't what Melania said. It was how long it took her to say it. Across the country, the quote echoed in classrooms, offices, and family dinners. Public reaction was immediate and raw. Ordinary citizens flooded social platforms with stories about how misinformation had shaken their trust. A retired teacher wrote, "For years I stayed silent when I saw people spread lies online because I didn't want to fight. Now I understand that silence helps the lie survive." A mother in Arizona shared that she showed her teenage son the clip telling him, "This is what responsibility looks like." The conversation was no longer about politics. It was about truth timing and courage. Across organizations and advocacy groups, the moment became a teaching tool. Nonprofits that train public speakers and journalists began citing the hearing in workshops. PowerPoint slides bore the headline, "Case Study the Crockett Confrontation." Trainers replayed the footage to demonstrate what composure under pressure looks like. Public relations courses broke down Jasmine's tactics, her posture, her tone, her precision as a masterclass in restraint and strategy. A media ethics professor called it a clinic on truth-telling through patience. Jasmine Crockett's image was suddenly everywhere. Her calm expression, her hands resting firmly on the stack of evidence, became the face of integrity. Newspapers described her as the woman who weaponized silence. Political blogs wrote think pieces on her timing, how she allowed Melania's overconfidence to peak before reversing the entire narrative. For many Americans, she became more than a congresswoman. She became a symbol of what it means to fight misinformation without losing composure. But the real shift happened beyond screens and headlines. It was cultural. In the weeks that followed, fact-checking sites reported record traffic. Searches for verify before sharing tripled. Community pages began including links to trusted sources before reposting political content. People were no longer scrolling mindlessly, they were reading, questioning, confirming. The hearing had lit a fuse that traveled into everyday life. In politics, the shockwave reached Congress. The Committee on Civic Ethics convened to discuss new guidelines on public responsibility. Lawmakers proposed that anyone with a significant platform, from politicians to media figures to influencers, should issue formal corrections if their words spread misinformation with measurable impact. It was controversial, but the conversation itself marked progress. "We can't legislate silence," one senator admitted, "but we can hold silence accountable." Those words, leaked from a closed meeting, sparked another wave of reflection across the country. In schools and universities, the case became an instant addition to curriculums. Debate teams reenacted the exchange to study persuasion timing and moral rhetoric. Communication professors dissected Jasmine's composure, labeling it a textbook example of assertive grace. Students were taught that in an era of noise, calm truth is revolutionary. One political science professor ended his lecture with Jasmine's closing line, "Silence when your words are being misused is not neutrality, it is complicity." The class rose in applause. Meanwhile, civic groups adopted the moment as a rallying cry. Voter education programs began using Jasmine's confrontation as part of their training materials, emphasizing the power of responsible speech. Across the country, new initiatives encouraged citizens to report misinformation, not ignore it. The phrase responsible influence entered the national vocabulary. What had begun as a congressional hearing turned into a cultural reset on truth itself. The analysis came next. Think tanks published essays. Editorials declared that words were not mere opinions, they were weapons. Used wisely, they could protect democracy. Used carelessly, they could corrode it from within. "Speech has power," one analyst wrote, "and power demands accountability." The article ended with a haunting observation. Those who speak to millions cannot pretend their echo is beyond their control. As the media storm continued, one simple truth anchored the entire story. Freedom of speech was never meant to be freedom from consequence. The hearing had made that visible in real time. It had stripped the illusion that words vanish after they're spoken. Instead, it showed that every statement carries a pulse, one that moves through lives, screens, and ballots. And at the heart of it all stood Jasmine Crockett, calm and unshaken proof that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, watches, and strikes when silence has said too much. Her legacy from that day wasn't just a victory in a hearing room. It was a new national standard, a reminder that the right to speak freely comes with one unbreakable duty: to stand by what your words create. Because in the end, freedom of speech was never meant to end with words. It begins with responsibility. From headlines to hallways, the lesson left the screen and walked into living rooms. Parents cued the clip at dinner and let the silence before the answer stretch across the table. A mother pointed to the pause frame and said, "This is why we think before we speak." A father asked, "What do you notice about her eyes?" right before she answers. A teenager said, "She waited too long, so the words sounded borrowed." The family nodded, learning that timing is a form of truth. In another home, a dad set his phone down and looked at his daughter across a pile of homework. "Every sentence you send into the world," he said, "comes back as a consequence." The daughter asked if that was fair, and the mother replied, "Fair or not, it's real." They talked about a classmate who posted a rumor and apologized only after it spread. The apology helped, but it did not unspool the harm. The parent ended with the same line, "Think before you speak." Parents began turning everyday moments into practice rounds. Before a text, a post, a heated group chat reply, the rule was simple: count to 5 and ask what the sentence will do once it leaves your mouth. A coach told her team, "Words travel faster than you can run," and the players laughed, then grew quiet. A grandmother shared a saying she kept for hard days: "Your voice can be a door or a wall." The children repeated it, testing the weight of the choice. The phrase, "think before you speak," settled into households like a new house rule. Schools echoed the lesson families were living. At a PTA meeting, a teacher rolled the clip and asked parents to mark the moment when silence stopped being strength. Students in a civics class reenacted the exchange and then rewound to study posture, tone, and patience. They practiced phrasing that made room for facts and closed the door on rumors. A quiet student raised her hand and said, "I used to stay out of it. Now I know staying out of it can help a lie stay in." The room agreed the goal was not to dominate, but not to be silenced. In boardrooms, the hearing became a case study with bullets and playbooks. A communications director opened training with one slide: consequence timeline. The first exercise asked executives to identify the exact second reputation bent. Was it the statement, the silence, or the delay? People leaned forward when they saw how fast confusion outpaced corrections. The trainer said, "Speed without clarity makes a bigger fire." Heads nodded in a tight circle of suits. A second slide read, "Say less mean, more fix sooner." Crisis drills shifted from slogans to discipline. Teams rehearsed a 3-step rule: verify, clarify, rectify. The facilitator repeated, "Clarity beats speed, but silence is a decision," until the sentence stuck. A legal counsel warned, "You cannot litigate away a vacuum." An HR lead added, "Employees copy what leaders tolerate." Then the simulation dropped. A clip line goes viral. "Now what do you say in the first 60 minutes, the first 6 hours, the first 6 days?" The takeaway was simple: say it own, it showed the receipts. Startups learned fast because they had to. A founder drafted a clarity clause for investor updates. If a statement sparks confusion, a correction rides with it within 24 hours. Another founder sent a company-wide note: "If you must speak in heat, speak in daylight." Product teams built a one-click path for publishing corrections in-app, not buried in footers. A head of support mapped responses that named the error, named the fix, and named the timeline. The culture began to reward truth told early over spin told late. Large companies rewrote their codes of conduct with a new direct chapter, responsible influence. The section defined who held a microphone, executives, ambassadors, partners, and what duty came with it. It required pre-briefs before big interviews and post-briefs if a quote traveled farther than expected. It empowered junior staff to flag risky lines without fear. Most of all, it made clear that silence after harm was not a shield. The standard spread, "Think before you speak," and if you miss, fix fast and in full view. On campuses and in youth councils, a different fire caught. Young organizers watched the clip and named the tactic patient power. They admired that Jasmine didn't outshout. She outweighted and outaimed. At rallies, hand-painted signs read, "Not to be silenced, a promise to themselves as much as a message to the world." Debate teams practice the 7th moment, hold the line through 6 interruptions, then land the one question that cannot be dodged. The method traveled from lecture halls to city halls. Local youth candidates borrowed the discipline and made it their brand. A 22-year-old running for school board recorded a video, "I will be clear before I will be loud." A climate organizer told her followers, "We will not confuse volume with proof." They wrote campaign scripts with built-in checkpoints. If a claim can't be sourced, it can't be said. They posted their fact sheets alongside their speeches because they wanted their receipts to arrive with their rhetoric. The message resonated with peers tired of outrage without outcome. Mentors told the next generation that words are tools, not fireworks. A tool builds or breaks depending on the hand that holds it. Families were teaching that hand control at breakfast tables. Businesses were teaching it under fluorescent lights with timelines and drills. Youth were teaching it in the streets, in the council chambers, and in comment threads where patience became a new kind of protest. Across these spaces, the same lesson repeated until it felt like common sense. And so the conclusion wrote itself in clear lines. Power is not the loudest voice in the room. It is the voice that accepts the bill for what it sets in motion. Interrupting wins moments. Accountability wins memory. The applause ends. The cameras turn off. The consequences stay. Parents remind their kids, think before you speak. And when harm happens, they add stand up and make it right. Companies script the same ethic into policy, and young leaders script it into promise. Real power is not the right to interrupt. It is the courage to stand and accept responsibility for the consequences of your words. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.